What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 3 top 40 wide receiver rankings. Already went through my running backs earlier today. Quarterbacks, tight ends, and defenses will be coming out tomorrow. If you guys enjoyed the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. But let's just dive right into it here. Starting off in Tier 1, I have CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, and Jamar Chase. For CeeDee Lamb, just a really strong start to the season. Don't believe he's found the end zone yet, but he's second in targets. He's third in receiving yards and receptions, pretty much getting the production we'd expect out of him. Not scared of this matchup against the Bears. He is my wide receiver 1. Then we have my guy Puka Nacua, was high on him heading into the season, thought he was a little bit underrated. He's been a monster to start off the season. He is the wide receiver 1 in points per game. In week 1, despite being in and out of the lineup, caught 10 passes for 130 yards. In week 2, 8 receptions for 91 yards. Also had a carry for 45 yards and a touchdown. So Puka's going to continue to ball, even in a not so great matchup against the Eagles. And then we have Jamar Chase. Now, I certainly think there's some cause for concern with the Joe Burrow injury, but if you are going to have a quarterback go down, Jake Browning is the type of backup that you want, where he's not going to come in and be like this super safe, passive game manager. I mean, we saw it against the Jaguars, right? It was pretty much he was going to lead them down for a touchdown or he was going to turn it over. He's going to take risks. He's going to target his weapons, especially the top tier guys. That is Jamar Chase. We saw him command 16 targets, catch 14 of them for 165 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, you want Joe Burrow out there, but I think of all the situations that could kind of survive a backup quarterback, all the players, I do think Jamar Chase is in a fine spot. He's still going to be in Tier 1 for me. Now, moving into Tier 2, we're going to start off with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Not a great week 1, comes back with just a monster week 2. 9 receptions for 115 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. They're 5.5-point underdogs in this matchup. Could see a decent amount of passing volume against the Ravens. Then we have Malik Nabers, also coming off of a monster week 2. 9 receptions for 167 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not the greatest matchup here against the Chiefs, but Malik Nabers is a stud. He's obviously going to be locked in your lineup. And then we have Jackson Smith-Njigba, someone who I did have some real question marks about heading into the season. He's been a beast through 2 weeks. Week 1, 9 receptions for 124 yards. Week 2, 8 receptions for 103 yards. With what we've seen so far, I think he has to be considered a wide receiver 1 moving forward, and he is my wide receiver 6 this week. Then I'm going to go with Justin Jefferson going up against the Bengals. He's kind of a tough guy to rank because it has been a slower start to the season. Now, a lot of that has just been due to the quarterback play. J.J. McCarthy has not really come in and been all that productive. He hasn't even really been like replacement level. It's been rough in 7 out of 8 quarters for J.J. McCarthy. But now this is kind of a new look offense heading into week 3 where you're going to have Carson Wentz at quarterback. The offensive line is banged up. You have Aaron Jones, who's likely out. And so the offensive situation still isn't great. It's a pretty decent matchup here against the Bengals, but Wentz might be better than McCarthy right now, but it's still not going to be amazing quarterback play. You're hoping he can get involved. Obviously, he's still going to be a lock in your lineup. He's my wide receiver 7, but just a little bit lower than maybe you'd expect coming into the season. Then another huge riser, with JSN also in this tier, it's Zay Flowers going up against the Lions. In the first 2 weeks, he has been targeted 20 times and added 3 carries on the ground. He went 7 for 143 and a touchdown in week 1, and then 7 for 75 in week 2. The Ravens are making Zay Flowers the focal point of the offense. Mark Andrews has pretty much been a non-factor. Like, Zay Flowers is the guy in the passing game. The Ravens are pretty much going to be number 1 in implied points almost every single week. I think they're, second this week here against the Lions, but Zay Flowers has definitely earned himself a spot in Tier 2. And then the last guy in this tier, kind of a slow start, but it's Drake London going up against the Panthers, only 9.7 points per game through the first 2 weeks. I still view him in like this back end wide receiver 1 territory. Now moving into Tier 3, going to start off with guys kind of at a disappointing start. It is Nico Collins going up against the Jaguars. Week 1, 3 receptions for 25 yards. Bounced back, I guess, in week 2, 3 receptions for 52 yards and a touchdown. I know watching that Texans game, that Monday night game, when he had that awesome touchdown catch, it felt like, all right, Nico Collins is back. We're about to get a huge game. The Texans offense was moving the ball pretty much at will to start off that one. And then the offense just really kind of cratered. They fell apart, really struggled to move the ball throughout the rest of the game. I do like the matchup here against the Jaguars. I think this could be his first boom game, but there's certainly some cause for concern. The offensive line is not great. the offense as a whole just has not been super productive to start off the season. Then we have Devontae Adams as my wide receiver 11. Big week 2, 13 targets, 6 receptions for 106 yards and a touchdown. Kind of the production we were anticipating here, being a top 2 target for the Rams. Then at wide receiver 12, this might seem high. I have Tetairoa McMillan. I just think he has emerged as a very strong NFL wide receiver. Week 1, 5 for 68. Week 2, 6 for 100. And I think we're also in this weird spot where there's certain players who were drafted very highly who have been a little bit disappointing. Don't want to totally overreact, over 2 weeks, but there's certainly some concerning trends. For Tet, he's been a steady option. The Panthers' passing volume is going to be solid. They're likely going to be trailing in a lot of these games. And I just think Tetairoa McMillan is a very, very good NFL wide receiver. Also in tier 3, I have George Pickens. Rough week 1, solid week 2, 5 receptions for 68 yards and a touchdown. I think he can carry that momentum into this matchup against the Bears. Then I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill going up against the Bills. The Dolphins are huge underdogs in this matchup, 12.5-point dogs. I do think there was a little bit too big of an overreaction to just completely bury every single player on this Dolphins offense after week 1. And we did see a bounce back offensively. Like from an overall team perspective, I think the Dolphins are cooked. Offensively, I still think these weapons can give you something. Tyreek Hill, 6 receptions for 109 yards. It was a nice bounce back game. I think there's going to be passing volume here against the Bills, and I trust Tyreek to produce using that volume. Then a big riser, we have Deebo Samuel going up against the Raiders. I think through 2 weeks, I know it's a small sample size, I do view him as the more valuable wide receiver in this room with Terry McLaurin. He's put up 22.6 and 17.4 PPR points. Through 2 weeks, he's been targeted 18 times, also added a carry on the ground, which led to a touchdown. I think we could see some more creative usage, especially kind of getting him working out of the backfield a little bit. Also, just with Eckler going down, it just straight up like removes a viable pass catcher out of this offense. So maybe we get, some of those targets kind of siphoned off to the wide receivers and Deebo Samuel. At this point, I am viewing him as the top wide receiver here for fantasy with the Commanders. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Ladd McConkey. Kind of a slow start to the season, but it's not like he's been bad. Like week 1, 6 receptions, 74 yards. Week 2, 5 receptions for 48 yards. He's commanding 16 targets. I guess like the big issue and why it seems worse is that you have had solid games from both Keenan Allen and Quentin Johnston. But the major difference is just that those guys have gotten into the end zone. QJ's, I think, scored 3 touchdowns through 2 weeks. Keenan Allen had a touchdown in both games. Ladd has kind of yet to find the end zone. I'm still a believer in the talent. I think the overall passing environment for the Chargers is much better than expected. It's also probably true that, Keenan's going to be productive. Quentin Johnston looks like he's starting to put it together, but I still view Ladd as the definitive wide receiver 1 in this offense. And I do think there could be a buy low window, and I'd be willing to take advantage of it. I will say, though, not the best matchup here going up against the Broncos, although it was not Ladd who drew the Surtain matchup last year. I want to say he moved around and didn't, shadow one specific wide receiver. Now, moving into a pretty large tier 4, we're going to start off with Rome Odunze, who is coming off of a huge week 2, 7 receptions for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns. As you can see with the ranking, at this point, I do view Rome as the wide receiver 1. He was getting the hype throughout training camp. Decent week 1, huge week 2. I want to say the Bears are 3rd in implied points this week, which seems kind of crazy, but if they're running up the score against the Cowboys, I do think we could see Rome log another really strong game. Then I have back-to-back Bucs wide receivers, Mike Evans and Emeka Egbuka. Nothing crazy for Evans through 2 weeks, like 5 for 51, 5 for 56, but we know those boom games are coming. He's still obviously a top 2 weapon on this team. I have him as my wide receiver 1, but then Emeka Egbuka right behind him here. Strong start to his NFL career, 4 receptions for 67 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 for 29 and a touchdown. Is kind of producing through the touchdowns. Those are definitely elevating his point per game number. For Mike Evans, he's going to get his. We know he can have these big touchdown seasons, but I think both are very viable mid-tier wide receiver 2 options. Then we have back-to-back players here who were drafted very highly. We're talking like late round 1 into round 2 and have really disappointed through 2 weeks. We'll start off here with A.J. Brown going up against the Rams. Now, I know it's 2 weeks, it's a small sample size, but man, the Eagles' passing attack has really just been anemic. Through 2 games, he only has 9 targets, 6 receptions for 35 yards. It's a similar story with Devonta Smith. And it's kind of just a depressing watch. Like, you have this team that's so talented. They're like grinding out these wins, but they do just have so much talent at wide receiver, and they're not really taking advantage of it. Now, I do think A.J. Brown's going to turn it around. He's too talented not to, but it's also like I can't reasonably continue to rank him as a wide receiver 1. So at this point, he's my wide receiver 20. We're hoping for a bounce back. The talent is obviously there. And this is even coming from someone that like was pretty aware of the A.J. Brown thing heading into the season, where we knew his ceiling was always going to be capped playing in this offense. I've talked about how I think he has the talent to be like a true high-end wide receiver 1 for fantasy if he was in a different situation, but the upside was just capped with the Eagles. But you were still thinking that he had a solid floor of like 16, 17 points per game, and that he was going to produce somewhere in there. So far, that has not really come through. And then arguably someone with an even more frustrating week 2 was Brian Thomas Jr. And maybe you could argue it was better because it was more of like his issues versus just overall usage. But BTJ's week 2 was one of the worst games I've seen, a supposed star wide receiver play, because he had the opportunities. Like the targets were there for a big game. And just off the top of my head, he had the drop on 4th and 5, which would have iced the game for the Jaguars. He just straight up dropped it. It was a concentration issue, whatever. He caused the second Trevor Lawrence pick, where Lawrence is going to lead him into a hit in the middle. I wouldn't consider it to be a hospital ball, but BTJ did not even make an effort for it. Just completely pulled up in the middle of the field, led that ball to get picked. He had the play in the back of the end zone where it's like a tough catch, but he kind of takes this big jump where he doesn't really need to, and then he gets pushed out of bounds. He had another one in the end zone where he didn't even go for the ball. He almost ducked and barely put his hand up. It was a weird game out of BTJ, and if you're just going to be completely terrified of contact over the middle, his role might change in this Liam Cohen offense, and all of a sudden he's in a less desirable spot. So there is real concern here. It's just tough. I know Liam Cohen said he was dealing with a wrist injury. It seemed like that was just kind of, to deflect off of BTJ, but the tape was really, really bad. And so now there are going to be question marks of is this something he can just turn off? I know there was the hospital ball that T-Law threw him in the preseason. It seems like he's in his head after that, but is he just going to be able to flip the switch and all of a sudden bounce back in week 3? I don't know. So I have him here as the wide receiver 21, but it's certainly not the start you were kind of hoping for BTJ. And what's so frustrating is that you have seen a lot of the positives from Liam Cohen coming in, his influence on this offense. The issue is that the positives have literally gone to everyone but the top 2 wide receivers that you want for fantasy, where it's BTJ and Hunter who are not producing, whereas you have ETN, Bashal Tutin balling out both on the ground and through the air. You have De'Ami Brown getting involved, getting great looks on offense. You have Parker Washington coming out of nowhere, having a big game as the wide receiver 4. And so it's just been weird where it's the bet on the Jaguars offense has hit. Unfortunately, it just hasn't hit on the wide receivers you're looking at for fantasy. So BTJ, hoping for a bounce back, but man, that was an ugly week 2 performance. After BTJ, I have Jacoby Myers here. He is just a super safe option through 2 weeks. He has commanded 22 targets. Week 1, he went 8 for 97. Week 2, in a terrible passing day from Geno Smith, he still ends up with 6 receptions for 68 yards. Just a super, super secure option in your fantasy lineups. Then I have 2 guys with disappointing week 2s. Garrett Wilson now going up against the Bucs. He had a big week 1, kind of came back down to earth in week 2. This is just good wide receiver in a not so great situation. We'll see about the status of Justin Fields this week. And then Marv, strong week 1, once again, just like Wilson, down week 2. He has just struggled against the Panthers so far in his career. And then he's still just not earning enough targets. Only 11 targets in this matchup. I heard the soundbite from the Cardinals head coach, Jonathan Gannon, where he's talking about how, for this offense to run as optimally as possible, you need to be getting the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. But it just seems like consistently, dating back to last year, there's questions on how do you get Marv more involved? How do you get him more opportunities? And it's at some point we might need to kind of refocus our thinking and just accept that this is kind of what he is as a player, at least at this point, where he's not someone you can bank on to get a lot of volume. And he's a young player, right? This is early year 2. He could continue to develop, but I'm not going to be able to rank him as like a, top 15 option at this point. He is my wide receiver 24, 11 targets through 2 weeks. That is just not cutting it in the volume department. And then a couple more guys in this tier. DK Metcalf going up against the Patriots. He's also kind of struggled to command volume. Typically, Aaron Rodgers is peppering his number one with opportunities. DK Metcalf, only 13 targets through 2 weeks. And then we have T. Higgins. I do think the Burrow injury is a hit to Higgins more so than it is to Jamar Chase, just because Chase is the guy who's going to get some of those gimme opportunities. They're going to be looking to get Jamar Chase the ball, get the ball in his hands, give him opportunities after the catch. For T. Higgins, I do think it's a bump down, but I still have him in this like fringe wide receiver 2 range. In 2023, where we saw Browning have 7 starts, T. Higgins was still averaging like a respectable 13.2 PPR points per game. So not the end of the world, but obviously disappointing news. And then moving into a pretty big tier 5, we're going to start off with Chris Olave. The volume has been awesome, 23 targets. That is 3rd in the NFL through 2 weeks. The efficiency, the touchdowns haven't necessarily come, but I do think the Saints offense has been better than expected, which, good moving forward for Chris Olave. Then I have back-to-back 49ers wide receivers, Ricky Pearsall, Jawan Jennings. Mack came in, played super well, threw for almost 300 yards, 3 passing touchdowns. Ricky Pearsall's had 2 decent weeks, 4 for 108 in week 1, 4 for 56 in week 2. As long as he's getting decent quarterback play with the injuries around him, I think he'll be a fine wide receiver 3. And then Jawan Jennings, now he's been banged up heading into the season. I guess left the week 2 game or exited that game with a new ankle injury, but he still had a big game, 10 targets, 5 receptions for 81 yards and a touchdown. If he's on the field, he's going to be a top 2 target with the George Kittle injury, which makes him viable for fantasy. Then I have Xavier Worthy. There's no guarantee he plays in this game. Obviously, he had the dislocated shoulder. Seems like he's going to be back sooner rather than later. Not quite sure what effect that's going to have on his ability, but still, wide receiver 1 on a Chiefs offense that desperately needs weapons. He is someone that I would definitely consider playing. Then I have Courtland Sutton going up against the Chargers. This was a really bad week 2. 4 targets, only 1 reception for 6 yards. It was made worse by the fact that Troy Franklin went out and had like a career game, but also a career game where like the Broncos were so intentional on getting him opportunities, feeding him all these like manufactured looks. That's not great for Courtland Sutton. I think after week 1, a lot of people were thinking he was going to be like this locked in wide receiver 2 or even better, potential wide receiver 1. He's just never really been that guy. That's not really what I expected from him coming into this season. I did think he'd probably be more in like that fringe wide receiver 2 range weekly. Week 2 is not great. Not going to totally freak out about it, but he's my wide receiver 31. Then I have Terry McLaurin, slow start to the season. Week 1, 2 for 27. Week 2, 5 for 48. I do think he is going to be better, but it's less than ideal that Deebo Samuel is just taking a lot of the receiving volume. Then I have Michael Pittman, strong start to the season, 6 for 80 and a touchdown in week 1, 4 for 40 in week 2, nothing crazy, but didn't kill you in your lineup. This Colts offense is humming. They've put up 33 and then 29 points against a very tough Broncos defense. Pittman's a fine, mid to back end wide receiver 3 play. Then I have Jameson Williams coming off a pretty big week 2. It's just the volume that's an issue here. He's only commanded 9 targets in 2 games. Week 1, he had 4 receptions for 23 yards. Week 2 just had 2 big plays, so 2 receptions for 108 yards and a touchdown. With that limited volume, the weekly floor is just so low. And even though he can have these big games, it's not like 2 for 108 and a touchdown is like a nuclear performance. And so if you're not commanding volume, even the ceiling takes a hit, even if you are like a big play guy like Jameson Williams. And then the last guy in this tier is going to be Keenan Allen. It looks like he is going to have a very productive season. Through 2 weeks, he has gone 7 for 68 and a touchdown, and then 5 for 61 and a touchdown. Him and Justin Herbert clearly have great chemistry. This offense is way more pass-heavy than a lot of people anticipated, and he's getting involved, getting into the end zone. Keenan Allen's looking like a great value pick. And then the 6th and final tier, it's honestly tough to fill out kind of the rest of these guys. There's a lot of dudes who could be honorable mentions that I'll talk about at the end, but I'm going to go with DJ Moore. I'm not burying him after 2 somewhat down games. The Bears are 3rd in implied points. He's had 2 fine performances, just hasn't gotten into the end zone. 3 for 68 in week 1, 5 for 46 in week 2. I'll admit that the gap might be a little wide between Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. Like I have Moore here as wide receiver 36. I have Rome all the way up as wide receiver 17. like maybe that's too big of a gap after only 2 weeks and like one big game from Rome. But it also just feels like a lot of these wide receivers are tough to differentiate between, especially on like a week to week basis. Wide receiver 37, I have Keon Coleman. Didn't really do anything in week 2, but it was just like an uncharacteristic down passing game from this Bills offense. They have 31 implied points this week. Keon Coleman's been the target leader through 2 weeks. I still think he's very interesting for fantasy. We saw a bounce back game out of Jalen Waddle going up against the Bills this week, like I talked about with Tyreek Hill. He looked good in week 2. There's going to be a lot of passing volume. I still think Waddle's an interesting fantasy option. Then I have Devonta Smith, like I talked about with A.J. Brown, very disappointing passing game from the Eagles in both games, honestly. 9 targets, 7 receptions for 69 yards on the season. We know the talent is there. We just need to see this passing attack start to improve. And then I gave the nod at wide receiver 40 to Quentin Johnston. Now, not a great matchup against the Broncos, but he has been targeted 7 times in back-to-back games. And I know he scored 3 touchdowns, but he's still the wide receiver 7 in points per game. So great start to the season for QJ. Still has his issues, but he's winning down the field. He's getting into the end zone. And then I will just run through some honorable mentions. Wan'Dale Robinson, I wanted to find a spot, really had like a career game in week 2. The volume's been there. He just hasn't really flashed that like super high weekly ceiling. It'll be interesting to see if he just goes back to like that low ADOT, like PPR scammy wide receiver. But if he continues to make plays down the field, I will certainly have to give him his respect. Moving forward, you could, throw another shout out to Troy Franklin, who I talked about in my waiver wire video, also like a Calvin Ridley. Titans offense just hasn't been great. Hollywood Brown, especially if Xavier Worthy doesn't play. I think Matthew Golden is someone who could see an uptick in usage. When you just look at his routes in week 2, like the dude was open. He was just rarely the primary read, even was missed deep on a potential touchdown. With the Jaden Reed injury, just opens up more routes for him. He's interesting. Could throw Jerry Jeudy in the mix. A lot of these wide receivers that could kind of fill into that last tier. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 40. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.